Hello and welcome back to the Resilient Philosopher. This is the Leon Dantes coming once again to you this week. And today I would like to go over the reason why the books are called The Prism and The Resilient Mind, and why we use the name The Resilient Philosopher. Let's start with what is a prism. A prism is defined as a transparent, often triangular shaped object made from glass or another clear material. Its primary physical function is to retract light, that is, to bend and separate the white light into its component colors, creating a visible spectrum, often called a rainbow. This happens because different colors, wavelengths, of light bend by different amounts when passing through the prism. So, what are the benefits of a prism? Literal and metaphorical. Well, first, it reveals hidden complexities. By splitting the white light into the spectrum of colors, a prism shows that what seems simple, like white light, is actually made up of many different distinct parts. 2. Scientific insights. Prism helps in understanding the nature of light and optics, aiding physics, astronomy, and various applied sciences. Technical uses. Prisms are used in devices like cameras, binoculars, spectrometers to manipulate light effectively. Now, metaphorically, this can be used as clarity through perspective, transformation of perception, revealing the spectrum of human experience, and alignment and focus. But what does it really mean in the philosophy of leadership and life that I try to speak about in this podcast every single week? Well, the reason why I chose that book for the philosophy part of the work, it is because we often view our truth personally to be true. And the world has gotten to a point where your personal truth is the only truth and there's no other truth. You fall into this complete isolation of accepting that you might be wrong. And then we choose, in particular, which people are we willing to tolerate to call us wrong. And I've seen that more and more. I used to be that way, but I outgrew that. It came to a point that I noticed that, well, maybe I don't have all the truth. Maybe I don't have all the answers. Maybe there's no such thing as truth because everything changes in the world. Everything changes every single day. What can be true today might not be true tomorrow anymore. What people thought 100 years ago was impossible, it's impossible. But no, now has become possible. An example of that is the cell phone. If a person that was born 100 years ago saw a cell phone now, mind blown. But let's not go too far. If a person that died in 1980 was brought back to life today, 45 years later, they wouldn't believe it, the advances that we have come to. And yet, they had seen futuristic movies where some of the ideas of what we're using now were already being established. And the reason why it's so important to get that growth is because we have to look at truth as a prism. It all depends on the angle in which you're looking at, the color that you will see. It depends how you use it, what you will obtain from it. And you got to realize if a white light is hitting the prism from your angle forward, and there's a person on the other side looking with a light from their angle towards you, both of you will see different colors, different aspects through the same prism. How do you know this? Look at Christianity. Look at religion itself. Depending on the preacher, depending on the pastor, depending on the church, they all have different point of view from the same Bible. Not only that, look at history itself. You got so many historians writing about the same situation, the same story, yet they give different perceptions, different ideas. Look at the Gospels. You have 4 writers for the Gospels. All 4, in one way or another, complement one full story. They all give different angles of the idea. Sometimes it's necessary. The more data you can capture, the better it is. For example, there's an accident. The more witnesses to the accident, the better chances of you actually getting the information that you need in order to really know what happened at the accident. But it's, again, the way that you use that information, the ability to accept that the truth is not whole, that there's always ways to prove something to be true. And even then, there's a slight chance that might not be the whole truth. There might be a little more to it that will complete it even better. Now, for me, it's important also because a prism, I can't align different point of views, just like in philosophy. So the philosophy books are always going to be under the prism or a prism series. And then comes my other series, which the Resilient Mind series is going to be 7 books altogether. The purpose of that series is to establish a 8-week program for leadership training. I am probably going to start having available a 4-week training course based on the 3 volumes. Once the 3rd volume is finished, we're currently working on that. And the 2nd volume just came out this weekend, and it is Mastering the Self, the Resilient Mind, Volume 2. And I highly recommend it. It's the best way you guys can support the show and the work that is being done. But the idea is, and what I wish would happen was corporations would actually pay for this stuff. So my idea is making a 7-volume of the Resilient Mind series in hopes to create an 8-week program based on all 7 books. And again, my hopes is to have a corporations pay for this work so everything else can remain free. And if a corporation would like to sponsor the work, that will be even great. That would be better because that would speed up the work way faster. I do this stuff in my free time with my family, volunteering to help me. So, but yeah, that is the idea of it, and it is shaping out pretty well. Like everything, if you do it with a huge team, with a lot of funding, yes, it is easy to grow. But when you analyze what resilience is, what it is to be resilient, is to embody the capacity to endure, adapt, and grow stronger in the face of adversity, stress, or failure. It's not merely surviving hardship by transforming challenges into opportunities for growth and deeper self-understanding. So the core elements of resilience, endurance without surrender, adaptive flexibility, emotional mastery, learning and growth, purpose driven persistence. So let's cover what endurance without surrender means. It means resilience means standing firm when everything pushes you to fall. It is the refusal to break under pressure, even when circumstances feel overwhelming or unjust. Adaptive flexibility is true resilience is dynamic, not rigid. It involves adapting to new realities without losing sight of your core values and vision. This flexibility allows you to navigate change without losing yourself. And emotional mastery, being resilient means managing emotions without letting fear, anger, or despair dictate your actions. It involves awareness and regulations so you can respond rather than react. Learning and growth is resilience transforms hardship into a teacher. Every setback becomes a source of insight, every failure a lesson. This continuous learning process deepens your wisdom and sharpens your leadership. Purpose driven persistence. Resilience is anchored in a higher purpose of vision. This purpose fuels persistence and provides meaning even when the path is difficult. As you can see, a lot of that is pretty much, if not everything, the work that is being done through the Resilient Philosopher, through the website visionleon.com, and the reason why I started this. Resilience reminds me of endurance, yet they're not the same. To endure is to continue through something, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you will learn a lesson. You just were able to overcome it. You endured through the winter, but did you learn to be resilient during the winter? Because resilience means learning from those obstacles and overcoming them and coming out stronger than when you went in. But it does remind me, you gotta endure, but at the same time, you gotta be resilient and learn so that you don't fall back into that having to endure scenario. And you can move on to the next lesson life gives you. So resilience reminds me more of Stoic wisdom, which has helped me tremendously in the last 6 months, maybe a little more. And it really fueled the need to start the podcast way after I had started writing for the website. But now let's look at the big overview of the Resilient Philosopher view. Resilience. Resilience is not about a discover leadership like never before with leadership lessons from The Edge of Mental Health, The Resilient Philosopher, and Mastering the Self, The Resilient Mind, Volume 2, transform challenges into strength, embrace authentic influence, and lead with clarity. Available now from Vision Leon, LLC. Your journey to resilient leadership starts today. The Resilient Philosopher's view on resilience is not about feeling pain or giving up or perhaps being too weak. It is about embracing that weakness, embracing the pain, and choosing courage over and clarity. It is a discipline of the mind and spirit forged in crucible of experience and reflection. Resilience requires commitment to personal truth and responsibility, even when the external world is harsh or indifferent. So, in reality, the idea of the work is to create a vision for the need of servant leadership. And if any of you, well, I would say the ones that follow the show would know that I'm a spiritualist, but I've always seen the example of Jesus as the true example, a perfect example of what real leadership should be. And the reason why I say that is because he was a servant leader. He was a leader to serve others, not to gain a throne, power, wealth, possession over other people. When you hear people comparing themselves to alphas, you're a beta, I'm an alpha, putting you down, those are not leaders. A leader does not need to show whether they're alpha or beta. A leader takes initiative to help others, not themselves. Nothing is beneath a leader. Nothing. And an example of that is when Jesus Christ cleaned his disciples' feet. And when people might not realize the importance of that, they might think, oh, that's humility. No, it's not just about humility. In those times, people wore sandals, and their feet got muddy with the sand. They needed to clean their feet. It was not a matter of who would do it. It was a matter of need. They needed to do it. They had been with him traveling, and instead of calling a servant to come and do it, he did it himself. That is showing humility. And the reason why he showed humility is because it was something that needed to be done. It was not something that he did to as a gesture of, look at me, what I'm doing. I'm above everybody because I belittle myself to do this. No, he didn't see it that way. He saw it as taking initiative. It needed to be done, and I'll do it myself. Because I love my fellow men. Because I love what my Father created. That's the message that I get from that. And when I hear this whole talk about alpha and betas, it just doesn't make sense to me. How could you call yourself a Christian and debate alpha and beta? How could you call yourself a Christian and be a nationalist? It just doesn't go hand to hand. And it reminds me of a poet from Cuba that he says that it's not the same to live it's not necessary. The whole idea is that we need to focus on learning to be servant leaders, learning to be there for our family, our friends, our loved ones, learning to be there as an employee, learning to be present. That is what a servant leader does. It is taking leadership not for a title to gain money, possession, recognition, but it's like I told a friend of mine lately, a perfect example of leadership would be a firefighter that sees a fire, and when everybody's running away, they're going in. Now, you can say many things. We're not going to discuss the personality, or if the firefighter is narcissistic, none of that. Let's just use the idea. And I told that person, I said, you will know who the real alpha is when somebody breaks into a room and says, who's the alpha? I'm going to shoot him. And most of the time, the guy calling himself an alpha will just cover away. Why? Because before he can react, the guy who is willing to take initiative would already done something. And many of friends of mine that I've had the opportunity to have deep conversations like this about have said the same thing. In their life, the leaders are not the ones that have the noise, the screams, and the look at me scenario, but the actual people that take initiative to help others themselves and still have time to do what they have to do to survive. So I'll leave you with this, and I would want you to think about it very, very carefully and hard. When you look at the examples of the people, not just men, women as well, around you, look at the people around you and see who would you like to follow, and then don't follow them. Learn from them to be the same or better and become leaders like them, because true leadership requires not followers, requires people willing to learn to become better leaders. Because as my Irish friend always reminds me, the biggest room in our life is the room for improvement. So when you meet a leader, learn to become a better leader than him. And if he truly is a leader, they will teach you happily, because there's no bigger compliment. There is no bigger wealth for a person that is a leader than to empower others to become leaders and even better than themselves. I want to remind you again, the second volume of The Resilient Mind is now available, Mastering the Self. It is available in plenty different platforms on ebook. And if you want your copy on Amazon right now, I put it at the lowest price that they allow me. That would only last until the end of the month, and then it most likely will go up again in price. So if you want to get your copy, I strongly advise to get it now before the end of the month. And like always, until next week, this is the Leon Dantes, the Resilient Philosopher, wishing you to stay strong, to stay resilient, and to always show up for yourself.